Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Rooted Woman Project. I am so excited that today I get to invite you or introduce you to a friend of mine named Laura. She is going to talk to us about a particular subject that I am very interested in right now, and I think will relate to so many of you, especially this time of year. She is passionate about intentional living. And if you follow her on Instagram, you will see that she portrays this quality so beautifully in the things that she shares. Her commitment is to sharing her personal journey and learning to step into her power. And then as she learns these things, she shares them and teaches them to others through her own experiences and realizations. So the thing that's also so relevant here is that she is a mom. So for so many of us who think we want to have a more intentional, slow living life, but can't because of kids, she is here to squash that myth and teach us how. So please welcome Miss Laura.
Thank you so much. I'm excited. That was quite the intro. I feel like I need you to just write my bibliography for me.
I am just speaking to the energy that you emanate. I feel so fortunate to have been connected to you through a mutual friend and to been able to just sink deeply into your Instagram, which has just taught me a lot. And then to be able to meet you in person and spend time with you in nature, it's just been a really beautiful, blossoming friendship. So I'm really, really happy to have you here and to talk about this with you.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm excited to be here.
So I know you have a very rich kind of background with art and intentional living. And I'd love to just take a few minutes for you to share a little bit about yourself and what you're bringing.
Absolutely. Man, if I can start, I would begin with after college, I packed up a backpack and I sold all my things and I went and I traveled for a couple of years, which is where I met my husband. And that was basically like the jumping off point in my life that led me down this intentional living path.
Mhm.
It had always been something very near and dear to my heart, but
Mhm.
I never quite understood what that looked like and how to embody that in my life. But by stripping back what I needed in my life, what I wanted in my life, I was able to better understand who who I was and what I desired for my life to look like.
Mhm.
And I was able to truly live in that way without fearing the expectations of those around me as I once had. And that just really set me off down my path. And once I got back to America and kind of settled in, I got married. And then it was like phase two of life almost. Reset button felt like it was pressed. I was still on that journey, but it was the focus of art came into view. So I started doing fiber art, and that was my passion for a good 4 or 5 years.
It's
And I was doing
beautiful.
that. Thank you.
So
I
beautiful.
was I was doing that when Luna was a baby, and I would continue doing that through Logan also being born. And but it started feeling out of alignment. It just was this like push and pull between my work and my children, and I didn't want that.
Mhm.
And so I got to this point where I said, I'm taking a pause and something needs to change. I don't know what that's going to look like, but something has to happen because I am extremely unhappy
Hmm.
and I'm feeling angry all the time.
Wow.
I'm feeling frustrated and almost resentful, and that's not who I am. So it's like something is out of alignment, something has to give. And I basically took 9 months off and said, all right, what do I want my life to look like? What brings me joy? What brings me fulfillment, creativity, creating, learning, growing? And so I dived into natural dye. I dived back into baking, into gardening, just filling my cup with things that really brought me joy.
Mhm.
And I jumped back onto Instagram and just started posting some of my natural dye projects, and people loved it. And that was really exciting and unexpected.
Mhm.
And and then I was like, you know what? Why am I limiting myself to just fiber art? Like that was a big portion of my life. I created my identity basically around that on the platform. And it was really a struggle because I wanted to provide this level of education and informing my followers and letting them feel a part of what I was doing. But it really wasn't the sole focus of my life anymore.
Mhm.
So I made not necessarily a U-turn, but I made a turn
Mhm.
and began focusing on intentional living because my life, my focus of my life is to live intentionally. And that doesn't need to be just a single route of fiber art. That can be an aspect of it, but
Mhm.
having that realization and also releasing that and saying, okay, this piece of me, it may come back around, but it doesn't have to be who I am in my entirety for the rest of my life. That's like ridiculous and not sustainable.
Mhm.
And I dove in and I just began sharing what that looked like on a daily basis. If it was baking, great. If it was natural dye, great. If it was fiber art, great. Or if it's just an epiphany I had, awesome.
Mhm.
And that's just been a really beautiful and fulfilling and also freeing process.
Yeah, I bet. Because now you're not having to pigeonhole yourself into one specific way of showing up in the world.
Exactly. And that was like such a struggle because it's hard when you, like you said, pigeonhole yourself. And I mean, everywhere says niche, 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 niche down. How can you get like as micro as possible? And I was like, that's not me. Let's be real. You know, everything doesn't, there's not a one size fits all.
Right.
And it's what fits my life
Right.
and what fits my family's life, and
Mhm.
how can I basically unlock that
Mhm.
and create a fulfilling everyday reality.
I love that you say this, and this isn't necessarily the topic we were going to talk about, but the thing that this is bringing up for me is like when it comes to being someone who wants to teach and support and be of service to people through the living of your own life. It's like on this hand over here, you're taught those really traditional stories, like you said, of like niche down, pick your one thing, like target the audience, right? But then it almost extracts you from the life of the person.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
it feels like what you're bringing and what you're embodying is the totality, the whole story. Like I want my whole life to be representative of being of service and
Mhm.
slowing down and teaching through my experiences. And I love that because it gives other people permission to do that too, to not
Mhm.
compartmentalize.
Absolutely. Like I got my degree in social work, and one of the things that really resonated deeply with me was seeing things from a holistic perspective. I
Mhm.
feel like in life, we're so segmented in how we approach not just healing, but like living in general.
Yeah.
It's either we go to the doctor or we see like the naturopath, or we go to, it might be like a church for somebody, but we're not looking at healing through this holistic framework of, you may be a person who believes this one thing, or this one thing helps bring you healing in some aspect of your life or fulfillment or joy, but that doesn't have to be the only single route that you take. And that's something that I'm enjoying exploring and learning and growing in and practicing. Just saying, okay, I've learned this today. This sounds really interesting. It feels like it resonates. I'll try it out. It may resonate, it may not. And
Mhm.
it just gives you the freedom to say, I want to try something new,
Yeah.
something that sounds exciting, something that's, lighting my soul up. And
Mhm.
there's a reason that your soul is lit up by something. And
Mhm.
I fully say, go chase after it, try it out, see what that is about. What is that desiring to teach you? What
Mhm.
is it asking you to maybe look at within yourself in areas that may require some healing or revisiting?
Mm.
Like life is just constantly providing us these opportunities to really delve within and see what it brings up for us.
Yes, that is a big one right there.
Mhm.
But that makes me think of a couple of things. One of them was this, like, I feel like we get kind of caught up in not wanting to chase the excitement because it's like, oh, what if it doesn't work out? Or like, oh, I really want to try this thing, but what if it doesn't work? Or I'm thinking in particular of somebody who like maybe they want to start their own business and like, oh, but what if it doesn't make any money and I'm going to put all this effort into it or whatever it might be, or we're like, and we stop ourselves. We stop
Hmm.
ourselves from really going in and just experimenting. Like just have fun with it. It doesn't have
Mhm.
to lead somewhere. Sometimes the excitement is the journey. That's the result. That's the end of it.
Absolutely. I feel like I really fell into that trap for a little while, especially because my creativity was my source of income for a good period of time. I mean,
Hmm.
now it's kind of circling back and it is coming back to that and being that again.
Hmm.
But I had fiber art as my security and my income source. And when I lost that, I
Hmm.
then had to say, okay, what am I plugging into that, little hole that's now gone?
Right.
And then I began to put so much pressure on myself. And I feel like we easily do this. We put this pressure on ourselves to
Yeah.
make it this source of income, make it our livelihood. And
Yeah.
that's not always the way that it works.
Right.
It's really, I've tried on so many shoes as far as like careers go in my life.
Hmm.
And what I have found most recently, the most beautiful realization and kind of like full circle moment is just how all of the things that I've tried, all of these like avenues that I've explored are now like funneling into who I am at this moment in time and what I represent and what I'm focused on.
Yeah.
And for so long, I was frustrated with myself because I was like, oh, I've tried this, it didn't work. I tried this,
Yeah.
and I was beating myself up because I wasn't choosing that single path and I wasn't monetizing quick enough. And I wasn't, through society's lens,
Yeah.
I felt like I was a failure.
Right.
But I knew deep down that wasn't the truth, that wasn't the reality. But when you hear from so many different focal points all around you telling you how to live your life,
Yeah.
it it really does, it sinks in some ways.
Hmm.
But the moment that I was like, no, I'm going to be me, I'm going to do what I love and find a way to integrate that with my family in a way that allows me to be a present mom.
Yeah.
And things just kind of fell into place, and what didn't belong began to fade away, and what resonated just began to grow and blossom. And I
Yeah.
think that's something that people need to get more comfortable with is
Yeah.
that discomfort,
Hmm.
but knowing and trusting ourselves that it will evolve just as it should.
Yeah. That's beautiful. The way you put that is stunning because the thing that made me that you're kind of really landing for me here is when we feel that pulse of excitement, you spoke to how we get to then sit with what that brings up for us.
Mhm.
I love this so much because I recently dove into this whole big story of how last year I was invited to go to Sedona with this women's weekend. And it was the epitome of this thing I was excited to do and desiring so much. But then the moment it was on my lap, I was like, I didn't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. I was like immediately anxious and it sent my whole world into a tailspin. And I feel like what you're speaking about, like I just keep getting this visual of like Velcro, right? Where it's like
Mm.
separating like our excitement about something and then the duality of the fear or the mind thoughts or the expectations come in. And it's really about separating the self, trusting. You said like you really had to trust yourself. It's like a commitment to feel your
Mhm.
truth, the courage to honor it, and then separate from those external expectations and obligations, as well as our own internal fears and stuck energies around it, around claiming
Mhm.
it.
Yeah, I love how you gave that visual because yes, it's you I don't even think you have to necessarily separate yourself from it. I guess in a way you do, but I more see it as like an integration and an understanding, like befriending this this aspect of ourselves that can be a foe. If we
Mhm.
make it into a foe, it
Mhm.
easily becomes this like demon on our shoulder of something that we can't accomplish and do because we give it so much power.
Right.
But the moment that we begin to say, I hear you,
Yep.
all right, so what does this mean for who I am and how I desire to show up in this world? Is this aligned? If it's
Mhm.
not aligned, I don't need to listen to you at all.
Right.
But it could be speaking wisdom into your life in a way of saying, hmm, there's this piece of myself that's really causing me some discomfort.
Mhm.
And what I have started to do in my life is when I feel that discomfort, I
Yeah.
almost like poke the bear. Like I I do the opposite of what I think a normal human being would do. I lean like what is it? Brene Brown. I lean into that discomfort and I say, "All right, I'm going to create more opportunities in my life that help transform that discomfort. It will the more that I push myself in this area, the
Yeah.
less uncomfortable it will feel over time, and I'm
Yes.
gonna learn something about myself. Something's gonna come up if I allow myself to, like, truly reflect and sit with that emotion and understand what's coming up for me and why I'm feeling the way that I am,
Yeah.
and ultimately, it just tends to come back to this feeling of self-worth, you
Mhm.
know, do I really feel worthy of this life that I'm creating.
Yeah.
And once I'm able to break through that and just give myself compassion and grace and understanding,
Yep.
it's a really beautiful thing to watch that unfold.
Yes. I love that you say like you befriend it, right? Because that's all it wants is a little bit of acknowledgement and healing. Like clearly it
Mhm,
needs some tending to. And when you can invite it in and really listen to what it has to say, but then heal the parts of your body that still feel really entwined in it so that you can move forward, it
mhm.
really is a beautiful integration. Integrate.
It
Yeah.
really it is really crazy to see how how much growth happens when if there's something in your life that's holding you back, or if
Mhm.
you're showing up in a way that is causing you not to be able to show up as you really desire,
Mhm.
and you take a moment to sit with that and
Yeah.
to find out the root of that,
Mhm.
that foe, that thing that you're really fighting with or that you think that you can't come up against. It's usually something that has been put there as a survival mechanism to protect you at some point in time.
Mhm.
And now it's just about saying, thank you
Mhm.
for keeping me safe.
Yeah.
Thank you for helping me feel secure and understood. And I appreciate you being there for me at that point in my life, but I'm a different person now.
Yeah.
It's not necessary now. Like, I want to show up in this way, and I'm going to begin acting as that individual.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I'm getting so excited. Okay. I mean, I've already been excited. Um, it it makes me think about how, as you're doing what you're saying, like you bring this part of you in, you acknowledge it for the gifts that it at one point offered you and served you. But in that like really intimate getting to know that part of yourself, I've noticed too that as situations arise that that part of me wants to come forward, I'm better able to identify it. Like
Mhm,
because I've been intimate with it and I've really let myself feel and understand, I'm like, oh, I'm doing that thing again where I'm feeling this and doing this. And it allows me to kind of like, okay, I'm going to reorient and do this thing instead.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes me feel like what you said, like you kind of have this vision of this person you're evolving into. And then that gets to be the light that draws you up and out and into a new habit, a new way of being.
Yeah. I mean, I I've had the same experience and I love how you described it because it's exactly right. Like you're going down one path, you feel this trigger, and then your body wants to respond in its reactionary way.
Yeah.
And you're like, nope, I'm going to be responsive instead. And I'm going to break this cycle. And that cycle is probably going to continue to happen. And I'm going to continually have to break it. But
Hmm.
I'm this person. I'm not this person anymore. And
Yeah.
being able to just make that a reality. And it's challenging. It can be
Oh, brother.
exhausting, and
Yes.
there's ups and there's downs. It's like a roller coaster ride, but it's
Yeah.
totally worth it.
It really, really is because the more you do it, the easier it gets. Like
Mm-hmm.
last, maybe a couple weeks ago, I got in an argument with my husband. And you know how they always say couples have like the same argument, but in different ways. So we got in an argument in the evening, and in the morning we were still kind of like grumpy with each other. And I looked at him, I'm like, we're doing that thing we always do where we have a fight and
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna like ignore each other this morning. And I'm still feeling defensive, but I kind of want to do something different because this isn't
Mm-hmm.
fun, and so it's like just speaks to like I still feel the old pattern in my body, but I consciously want to create a new one.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like this doesn't always feel comfortable. It's not like, oh yay, I'm breaking a habit. It's work. It's work.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, you're having to create and carve out a new path. And
Yeah.
that's not easy work because I mean, you think of water, how it flows, it's going to go down the easiest path every time,
Yes.
unless you're there with a shovel digging
Yeah,
something new, you know?
totally. Yeah. Yes. And that's our bodies, that's our brains, right? Easiest path forward.
Mm-hmm. Every time.
So I feel like this actually flows really well into this concept of intentional living because I don't know for the people watching this, but I know originally when I thought about intentional living, I'm like, oh, it means I have to go live on a farm, which I actually want to do, right? Like I want to have
Same.
a homestead with chickens and a huge, gigantic organic garden and like land to roam with a creek on it. Like that would be my dream. But that's not my reality in the moment. And
Mm.
so I feel like I've heard you mention this. I don't know if it was like on an Instagram or just in conversation, but how that doesn't like you don't have to reserve intentional living for that. Like, so when you think about intentional living in the lives we currently have, how would you describe that?
Well, so I had a person come up to me and basically we had a similar conversation. They said, I'm busy. I have this business. I'm doing all the things. I'll slow down when I slow down. And I said, you don't have to live slow to live an intentional life. I think that's a common misconception. They do often go hand in hand,
Mhm.
but that doesn't have to be the reality. And the thing about intentional living, and I also say slow living for myself, is just understanding what your values are and aligning yourself with those values so that you can live intentionally. Because if you don't know what your values are and you don't really know who you are or what your dreams are, what your goals are, there's no way to live intentionally. You're just living at that point, which can be great at some point in our lives. But I think if we're really wanting to cultivate the life that we desire, then understanding this foundation gives you this compass, as I like to say, for you. So
Yeah.
if you go into a situation and you have various options, or somebody is offering like an event to you or a job offer to you, and you can really sit down with yourself and ask, okay, does this align? Does this make sense for my values, for my dreams, for my goals? And
Mhm.
when you have those things in place, they help guide you.
Yeah.
And you can just really reflect on that throughout your day of, okay, what kind of person do I want to be? And how do I want to show up in my life? What are my values? And begin taking daily action, intentional action to be that person.
Yeah. I really like that because it makes it feel the vision that kind of came to mind was like a ship on the sea.
Mm,
And to not be intentionally living is you're just kind of bounced around from wave to wave and you're more in reaction mode.
absolutely.
But when you can get really clear about the direction you're moving, you can put wind in your sails, set course, and move in that direction
Hmm.
consciously.
Yep.
And that feels really, really powerful when it comes to kind of reclaiming how you want to live, no matter
Mm,
what that looks like, even if it's
yep.
like having a high-rise apartment in New York City or
Yep.
having a cabin in the woods someplace. It doesn't
Hmm.
really matter where, but it's about putting your intention towards the life you want to create.
Yes. And I think it's so important to say that, like, my ideal life may not look like somebody else's ideal life.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's how it should be. We're not cookie cutter individuals where it's like, oh, all of these people are going to be exactly this way. Like, let's push them into this bucket to
Hmm.
live intentionally, and let's push these people in this bucket to live intentionally. And it's really about coming back to yourself, back into your intuition, back into tapping into who you are, what your why is, and having a strong why behind the life that you're creating. If that's making $1 million, awesome.
Hmm.
That's fantastic. I want to watch you reach that goal.
Hmm.
And if it's about living out off grid, great, make that your goal. And I want to see you make that unfold.
Hmm.
But it has to truly be authentic to you. It can't just be this. I So many people are not in touch, I think, with themselves.
Yeah.
And it's easy to not be in touch with yourself because there are so many distractions in the world. And I mean, doom scrolling and watching all the TV. Like, I mean, I'm not saying I don't fall prey to these things, but
Hmm.
it's very easy if you don't have that foundation to
Yeah.
just begin chasing after things that you think might bring you joy and fulfillment, when in
Mhm.
reality, no matter what path you choose, joy and fulfillment is going to come from inside.
Yeah.
And connecting to you and what you desire and what you want, and then begin acting on that and bringing that into fruition, that's really going to bring a person way more joy than any goal that they can achieve if it's not aligned with what
Hmm.
they truly want.
Right. And I feel like what you're saying too also plays into this, what we were talking about earlier with experimenting, with finding
Mm,
joy, like to be willing to explore what your vision and values might be. Because
mhm,
I feel like for myself at times I felt like, well, I don't know what I want. I don't know where I'm going. I don't even know what the next year like looks like for me. So how can I do this? But
mhm.
it feels like, I mean, how would you speak to that? Like kind of bringing it more micro.
Absolutely. I would say just try. Try again, fail, try some more.
Mhm.
And it's not gonna always look exactly how you expect it to look. It's not gonna unfold how you expect it to unfold. The universe has a sense of humor, and it will take you down whatever path it sees fit
Mhm.
to bring you to the point that you need to be brought to.
Mhm.
And I truly think that, yes, if you know at the age of 13 what you want to be and do with your life, amazing. But I think a majority of the population, that's not the reality. we get a degree, we finish college, we try out that job, and we say, nope, this isn't actually for me. Or, maybe you'll figure it out before then, maybe you'll figure it out much later. But really just saying, okay, what what are my values? Like all coming back to that and sitting down with yourself and, thinking through what really means something to you. For me, it's family, connection to nature, connection to myself, and figuring out ways to do things with my hands, figuring out ways to be resourceful and resilient, tapped in, tuned in to everything around me and the people around me.
Mhm.
And that really gives me so much freedom, but also direction.
Mhm.
And the only way I would know that is by going down lots of paths that were not correct for me.
Right. Yeah. So I'm thinking about, I'm going to speak from myself because I feel like I've had these challenges that you're speaking to. And
Mm,
another internal voice that I have that I've also heard with other people is I don't have time to be intentional. Like I don't have time to like slow the roll and stop the hustle. So
mhm.
when you think about what some of the biggest hurdles are that people come across with living with more intention, what are some of the small things that they can do when maybe they don't like they have to get up at 9 o'clock and go to a job and they don't come home from the office until 6 or 7 o'clock? Like, what would intentional living maybe look like in that aspect?
I think also, I mean, we'll come back to it depends on the person and what they want for their lives. But ideally, that person would be finding the smallest of ways to just tune into themselves.
Mhm.
So maybe they're doing that job on the walk to the bathroom or to go get water or the drive. They're taking a moment to be a little bit more reflective
Mhm.
on the choices that they're making and the thoughts that they're thinking.
Mhm.
But I find that some of my days just escape me. And I'm, I, even though I can't say that my day is like 100% intentional, because life happens and I have children and their lives take a lot of precedence over many of the things that I have planned. But the thing that I try to do is come back to myself at the end of the day or the beginning of the day, even if it's just for 2 minutes, and
Mhm.
to feel into my body, not like physically touching my, neck or
Mhm.
I guess it depends on the person,
Mhm.
but just taking a moment with myself. And it doesn't have to be a lot, like it doesn't have to be a deep guided meditation, but just feeling into the tension, feeling into the thoughts that I had during that day. If I felt inadequate, if I felt frustrated, if I felt joyful, if I felt fulfilled, and just reflecting on those things and saying, okay, less of this and more of this.
Mhm.
And that just helps when you begin the next day to give you more of that guidance for yourself so that you're not having to think on the spot of things that you want to do to be intentional. You
Mhm.
know, making sourdough bread, that takes a lot of time, and
Yeah.
not everyone has the time to do that.
Mhm.
But eating maybe a healthier meal could be that like atmosphere of intention for you. Or
Right.
instead of going out to eat and that fast food place and
Mhm.
just mindlessly, choosing something just because you're hungry, but you don't want to have to like think about it all.
Yeah.
Finding ways to just the smallest of tweaks. And it can just be one thing that you change for the whole entire month and
Right.
make that more of a habit that is integrated into your life.
Yeah.
Because when you try to change all the things all at once, it just falls apart. And then you're left feeling frustrated and that self-worth comes back up and you don't feel enough. And that's
Mhm.
just like a whole other like little demon that comes in and says, whispers all these terrible things into your ears about who you are and what you can do with your life. And
Mhm.
so really like I encourage just a single thing, a single tiny thing. And then after that month has happened, you can reflect back. If you feel like you did a great job changing that one thing to help create the life of your dreams,
Mm,
something as small as drinking more water, something as small as eating less fast food, something as small as, preparing something in an intentional way or taking a 2-minute walk or reconnecting back to your body. And then revisit it the next month and ask yourself, okay, if
mhm.
I feel like I've added this into my life, it feels good, it feels aligned. What do I want to undertake now?
Yeah.
Do I want to just continue that for this month
Mhm.
and really make this solidified into my routine and into my lifestyle?
Yep.
Which honestly, I think is really great to do,
Mhm.
especially as like a parent or a very busy business person.
Mhm.
Having that one solid thing that you can really look at. And I think when like I'm thinking of people right now who maybe are trying to like lose weight and are like with those New Year's resolutions that people make.
Yep.
And I encourage people to really look at the why behind the choices and the actions that they're wanting to change.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we look at a problem and we see like a surface solution, but in reality, there's something much deeper within you that needs to really be addressed
Mm.
in order for that change to really make change in your life.
Yeah. Yeah. You bring me to another point that I wanted to talk about tonight, which is as we kind of get intentional, we're asking ourselves some pretty impactful questions like
Mm,
what worked for me? What's my why? What are my values? Where am I now versus where do I want to go? I
mhm,
love this tip of picking one thing and just doing it for a month. Like that feels so easy and like
mhm.
digestible. But as you've talked about, like as we kind of start to ask these questions, it's like looping it back to at the beginning, other feelings are going to start coming up, other things that might that need healing or a little bit of attention.
Mm.
And I'm wondering if can you speak to what are some ways that you can start to work with all of these big feelings that might start to come up as a result of being more intentional and inquisitive?
Well, I think that there's a spectrum.
Hmm.
So there are individuals who have had real significant trauma in their lives, and that's something that I think therapy requires.
Hmm.
I think therapy is good for anyone at any point in time in their life, but if you're really diving into yourself and feelings and emotions are coming up and triggers are being triggered,
Hmm.
to assess the severity of that. And if you don't feel safe, then you need to find like a practitioner to work with.
Hmm.
But for other people who haven't had significant trauma,
Hmm.
more like a little t trauma rather than a big capital T trauma, I think that really tapping back into our bodies embodiment is really important.
Hmm.
And we are so disconnected from our mind to our body.
Hmm.
At least I realized how disconnected I was when I began doing embodiment work for myself. And the simplest thing that I have found for myself to help move through things is moving my body.
Hmm.
And it can be as simple as dancing to some music that brings me joy and fulfillment.
Hmm.
It can be as simple as I, in some evenings after a really tough day with the kids, and I can just feel my body in like this sense of fight or flight.
Hmm.
I will go into like our patio. I will lay out our yoga mat
Hmm.
and I will just tune into my body. I'm not going to go with any flow. I'm not working with any like yoga video, Pilates video. What do I need? Where do I feel something needs to be stretched? what comes up as I am stretching, what thoughts are coming up as I'm stretching.
Mhm.
And what I love to do is talk to the person, whatever emotion comes up.
Mhm.
So often it comes back to like the inner child,
Mhm.
something that, you know, I felt unsafe and I had to create this defense mechanism, or I had to create this wall or this boundary for myself to feel safe and secure. And it's presenting itself now. And there are things that come up and just bring me right back to that, you know, 13-year-old girl who really all she wants is to feel understood. But things, I don't want, I don't need to go into this deep story for myself, but just listening to what comes up for you
Right.
and feeling into that and listening to that. And I mean, a lot of people may not want to cry through it, but
Mhm.
I truly believe that allowing the tears, allowing that release, that surrender and letting go,
Yeah.
and finding like this new love for yourself and holding
Mhm.
that love for yourself, all versions of who you have been
Mhm.
from like your inception until now, because we're constantly evolving as individuals. There's
Mhm.
going to be so many evolutions of you, and there will continue to be evolutions of you.
Mhm.
So just honoring like where you're at and allowing yourself to feel
Yeah.
and connect back from the thought, all these thoughts that are like racing up here in our head of unworthiness or anger, frustration, things aren't panning out like we want it to. I'm not making enough money.
Mhm.
And all these things are happening up in our head, but they're being stored in our body. And we
Mhm.
need to begin working through those things.
Yeah.
And that looks different for everybody, but just
Mhm.
allowing yourself to tune in and move.
Yeah. Yeah. That's huge. One of the very first steps that they say when you're working with your nervous system is the step of name it to tame it, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't love tame it. It sounds a little like controlling, but just that idea of being with your body and naming a sensation or an emotion, and how even just bringing your conscious awareness to it, and then it can shift and move and turn
Mm,
into something completely different. And it eventually could morph into this thing that instead of it's causing you anguish, it's like, oh, I just want to pour love into that part of me. Yeah,
yes.
that's really beautiful. I love that process that you do. I also
It's
feel
been
like,
a
what's that?
I was gonna say it's been a learning process for
Yeah.
sure.
I feel like though, I think men have a challenge with this too, but in a different way. But I feel like connecting to our physical bodies is really, really powerful for women in kind of reclaiming them for ourselves, because they've been
Mm-hmm.
such a hot commodity for everybody else. And this way of just kind of re-identifying with it as a sacred vessel that's here to steward our life with us, like that feels in and of itself so powerful and such a
Mm,
great stepping stone on the intentional living.
absolutely. I totally agree. And
Yeah.
I do think that for men, it's a different struggle.
Mhm.
Um, I think for women, what comes up a lot is anger,
Mhm.
not wanting to let that anger out because like of a
Yes.
fear of what that anger might look like,
Yep.
It's like this dragon that's inside of us that we're like, if we unleash it, you know, all hell is gonna break loose.
Yep.
But like finding ways to unlock and allow ourselves to feel whatever emotion comes
Yeah.
up
Yep.
and begin just allowing ourselves to feel again. Like
Yeah.
stop numbing ourselves, stop trying to not feel.
Yeah.
We've fallen into so many patterns to not feel, to not think, to just kind of like go with whatever is told to us. But begin feeling again.
Yeah. And give yourself permission for it to be messy. Like that
Totally.
that was some guidance I got a long time ago when I was getting
Mm,
in touch with my anger. Like I think is anger and envy are probably two of my most favorite emotions because they
mm,
are so wise. And if you can hear the nugget in them, oh, the places they can take you, it is so
totally.
illuminating and so empowering. But when I was first getting in touch with the anger, this really amazing mentor of mine said, like, let it be messy. Like, just let the energy start to move because then you'll be able to, just like we talked about before, recognize it and be like, oh, okay, my
Mhm,
anger wants to attack here. Okay, what's that? Like, how can I kind of be in relationship with it? And that doesn't happen immediately, right? So
mhm,
it's it's a process of befriending these parts of yourself and learning how they speak. But yeah,
mhm.
anger,
One
such a good place.
one of my favorite things to say about emotions is that they're our guide. Like
Yes.
they're here, like you were saying, they're here to tell us something. And if
Mm-hmm.
we're able and willing to listen
Yep.
and dive a little bit deeper and to
Mm,
like talk with and figure out that underlying root of that feeling,
yep.
it can really open up a lot of doors of growth and healing.
Yeah. I love how this concept of intentional living is so much more rich than just feeding chickens and having a homestead, right? Like, like
It's definitely more than that.
right? It's I love how you've outlined it, that it doesn't matter what the vision is, it's about moving and living your life with the intention of moving towards that vision and being able to reflect back on the choices that you've made, even if it was just that day. Like, how was I in alignment today? What do I need today? How can I shift? What can I change? What's that one thing I can commit myself to this month?
Hmm.
I think these are all really, really beautiful places to start.
I want to say one thing to that. As you were talking, I had a recent conversation with a friend, and as she was talking, I just was like, I felt like this weight, like, was just like pressing down on me. Like, she was mentioning all the things that she was like trying to do and all these practices she was trying to integrate into her life in order to grow.
Mm,
And I think it's so easy to fall into this almost self-deprecating place
oh,
of trying all the things and wanting when we see all these things around us that need to be fixed or we
yeah,
feel need to be fixed or
yeah,
changed to be a more spiritual person, a more awakened person.
yeah,
But in doing that,
yeah,
we bring ourselves down so much and we hinder ourselves from actually being able to step into that growth.
yeah.
And so I think it's also really important to say, like, yes, we want growth. We want to, progress and heal,
Mhm.
but don't turn it into another thing that has to be done in a certain timeline at a
Yeah,
certain speed, because when you do that, you're going to basically pause yourself,
right,
and or the universe is going to cause you to have to pause yourself.
right.
And so being aware of how much pressure you're putting on yourself to have to be this person
Yeah,
that you desire,
yeah,
because it's all in the unfolding.
yeah.
Like it's baby steps. It is not fast track. This
Mhm.
is none of this is fast track. That's why I think the slow intentional living
Yeah,
is is that important process, because it's not the slowness and like raising chickens and, having the garden and all of
Right.
that. It's the slow, and it is the unfolding. The unfolding is a slow, steady process,
Yeah.
and try not to get caught up in trying to push your personal timeline or push society's timeline.
Mhm.
Things are unfolding exactly as they should, and allow that to unfold. And that's hard to do in and of itself. I mean, I struggle, and I constantly have to kind of rein myself back in and say, why am I feeling so anxious and frustrated?
Yeah.
Oh, because I'm trying to make this fictional reality, this fantasy reality that I have for myself of who I should be,
Mhm.
where I should be at this point in time, doing what and making what. And I'm trying to push that into the now.
Right.
And that's not the way it works.
Right.
Like, we are in the unfolding, and learning to just like embrace and allow, I think, is vital.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so important because then you're wrapping in this idea now of not allowing this why to be dictated by all of the things we see around us that we think we need to become to be better.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. Wow. I was gonna say one other thing, but it kind of like floated off into the ether. But
I hate when that happens. Sorry, I have a cough.
yeah. Oh, I remember what it was. It that slow process where I think this is where that one thing comes in, right? Like we
Mhm.
can't transform our whole life tomorrow, but what's one thing we can bring in that has the flavor of it so that we can start to relish in the journey more than we are driving towards the destination. Because I know
Mhm.
I fall victim to that. Like I'm like, oh, my life will become like my life will happen when this happens. And it's like, what about all this magic that could happen right now if I just
Mhm.
like, you know, but I do feel like humans, we're so geared to strive to evolve that when we can kind of give ourselves a little bit like now, it's like, okay, it kind of gives us something to build around.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I swear I always think this we'll just chat for a half hour and then it's like an hour later. So, in honor of our time and everyone's time watching, I wanted to just say that everything that we've talked about today, um, I'm going to include in the show notes all of Laura's information. So you'll have access to all of the places where she shares her magic. I would highly recommend that you get on her email list. She sends out these really beautiful emails at the beginning of
That's
every month. I love them. And they're all about intention setting, right? Like, what's the intention for that month? But not only is she doesn't just ask you that, she gives you these really beautiful things to kind of chew on. You talk about plant medicine, like what's the plant medicine of the month and the theme. And I look forward to them on the first of the month, every
Thank you.
month. So get on our email list. And then also on our website is a freebie that you can get where she kind of outlines the whole process of how to bring more intention to your life in a way that is unique to you and what you're looking to create. So um, we'll create links to all of that so it's easy for everybody to find. But I just wanted to say thank you for being here. I could sit in your energy and listen to you talk about intentional living for another hour or more. Like,
Well,
um,
thank you.
so I know I'm walking away from this with some really good nuggets that I'm excited to implement. So thank you for sharing your journey so that we can learn through your experience and
Thank
your little
you.
beautiful family.
I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I'm excited for everyone listening. I mean, anyone who wants to message me, I love talking with people about like helping them through whatever. So if there's a question that you have, I'm I check my Instagram pretty consistently, so you're more than happy to shoot me a DM or email me, whatever. I like talking with people.
All right, well, we will see you in the next episode. Thank you again for being here, Laura, and I'll see you guys later.
Thank you.